Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the 2024 MUFON International Symposium right here in Irving, Texas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by one of the speakers here at the conference, Robert Stankovic. Welcome to the show.
Thanks,
Rogers, so sorry. I was fascinated by your presentation and by the idea of Havana Syndrome, being married with UFO UAP experience. Yep. One of the great causes of this show is Havana Syndrome, targeted individuals, targeting technologies, and the idea that there is a crossover here.
Yep.
Between Havana Syndrome, the symptoms, the symptomology of that, and UFO UAP experiencers. How did you first, let's start off with the science of it all. How did you get into the world of neuroscience? How did you get into the world of studying Havana Syndrome to begin with, Roger?
Yes, so I've got to go way back. So I did a Bachelor of Science degree at Sydney University, majoring in zoology, and as a very young student, and then later on I got into the workforce. I was in medical technology, medical laboratory science for quite some time, and then I decided to specialise in neuroscience. So I got a job at the University of Sydney as a scientist in a neuropathology laboratory, and then they gave me the opportunity to actually do a PhD in neuroscience, and I did that in ALS, which is a motor neurone disease. So I did a mouse model for motor neurone disease, and then we published several papers, and I got my PhD. So that's how I got into neuroscience in a nutshell. And then basically I have had an interest in ufology for close to 40 years. I had an experience when I was about 15 on my parents' property, where I actually saw an orb-like object in the evening near a lake, which is at the back of my parents' property, and it came at fairly close proximity, and what it did, it actually hovered, did a crazy maneuver, and then landed and lit up the whole area for a couple of seconds as if it was daylight.
Oh,
and
wow.
that frightened the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So I ran back to the farmhouse, and ever since that day I've been obsessed with UFOs, because I was a blank slate to start off with.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about UFOs, and when I had this experience I thought, well, this is nothing prosaic, and basically I thought, my God, there must be intelligent life form coming to Earth. And so I read profusely on the subject, and eventually got involved in MUFON as a field investigator. Much later, in 2014 or 15, I can't remember. And then shortly after that, I became national director. And so I got into the research aspect of it, and being in MUFON, you actually get to talk to witnesses and investigate cases, which is great. So it's a proactive sort of thing to do rather than just read books. And so basically later on I actually got involved in a organisation called UAP Medical Coalition. So I saw their webpage, and I organised a meeting with them, and basically they're interested in getting people that have got a medical background into their organisation, so that they can actually utilise these people to get involved in their program, which is dealing with people who have had experiences with UAPs, whether they're close encounters or whether they're having psychological problems from other things like ontological shock, disclosure. So basically I got involved in that initially, and then one of the assignments that I was tasked to do when I joined that organisation was to read a report made by the intelligence community, which involved the Havana Syndrome. Because I'd heard about Havana Syndrome in 2017. It was briefly on the news in Australia, but I didn't know what it was about. And I didn't look into it, and I thought, it's something to do with, targeted energy attacks, and I don't know anything about it. But when I started reading this report, and a lot of it was redacted, I got intrigued, because I thought, my God, this is a modern-day mystery, because no one really knows who the perpetrator is, and no one knows what the actual energy weapon is, if there is such a weapon, or whether it's an attack by a directed energy weapon. They don't know. So it was a bit of a rabbit hole that I had to go into. And so the further I got into the rabbit hole by reading extensively, the more I got intrigued and the more questions came up. Yeah. And so eventually I sort of like, after reading a lot of articles, listening to a lot of podcasts, listening to what Congress had to say, Congress people, and
the
also
medical reports on the brain activity.
Medical reports on the brain activity from Gary Nolan and Kit Green and people like that. Basically, I got further and further intrigued, and I came up with a hypothesis that my leading hypothesis was that UAP transparency and disclosure is inextricably linked with Havana Syndrome. And I didn't come up with that lightly. It wasn't something that, like I had joined some dots, and through the information that I'd gathered, and I gave my talk the other day, and basically it was received quite well, with a lot of people come up to me and said, "Wow, that's an amazing theory." And I do have, I'm in contact with a Havana Syndrome patient, which I can't really say a lot about, but
a lot of them are still under gag order. A lot of especially Canada has been pretty kind to theirs. We have not been so kind to ours.
No.
As far as like, feel free to talk to somebody about your medical issue. We have not been so kind here in the States. They've been a little bit kinder about not gag ordering victims in Canada, things like that. And it's been really interesting to see that gag order response of no, don't tell anybody about your affliction right now. That is a really interesting point. Just the idea that none of them are able to talk about their actual injuries.
Exactly.
Or the results of tests that have been done on them. And it's been pretty remarkable to see, of course, the idea of the, quote, immaculate concussion. The fact that there is some white matter brain damage in many of these victims. And we recently had Dr. John Hall on. I know I was talking to you the other night about his work. He's been in the world of targeted individuals, targeting technologies, things like that for many years. And it's interesting to see the tie with hypothalamal damage.
Yes.
And the idea that when your hypothalamus or hippocampus rather, when your hippocampus is damaged, that it's almost direct access to your amygdala. And that is like fight or flight response. That is the reptilian brain at that point.
Is the flight and fight response.
And
the hippocampus says that is mainly memory.
And does a lot of regulation with that amygdala and with the access to that amygdala. So if you have hippocampal damage and you aren't regenerating your hippocampus the way that you should be, you will be in a state of panic. You'll be in a lot of the state that these Havana Syndrome people are saying that they're in, Now, when it comes to how do you marry the Havana Syndrome symptomology with UFO UAP experience and with specifically abduction and close quarters experience, Doctor?
Yeah, so I looked at both the signs and symptoms of patients that have had close encounters of the third and fourth kind, and that was mainly through the ODNI report on, or actually, I think it was a lot of it was Kit Green's material that I looked at, and looked at the signs and symptoms and put a table together with the signs and symptoms of what the Havana Syndrome patients were getting, and it's almost a perfect match, apart from two things: is that close encounter victims can actually fall unconscious, and also they can actually even die from a close encounter experience, and radiation effects as well. Whereas Havana Syndrome, and that's inadvertent, so if you get close to a UAP or if you get taken on board or whatever, basically this is exposure, whereas Havana Syndrome cases are targeted individuals, so it's an intentional thing, and also they don't undergo any radiation effects. So it's just specifically targeted to the inner ear, and then there's damage done to the brain. We don't know whether it's done through the inner ear the otolithic organs. So it's different in the sense that the attack or the exposure is very controlled, and as you say, it's an immaculate concussion. So you get brain damage and white matter damage. There's damage to the neural networks, and it's in a very controlled way, in the sense that whoever's doing this is actually controlling it to actually decrease the cognitive ability of the person that they're attacking. So they don't want to kill that person. They want to just decrease their level of cognitive ability, so it actually compromises them doing their job.
No, where it interrupts your sleep cycle, starts making you tired, starts making you anxious,
vertigo,
headaches,
tinnitus. They get brain fog. They can't cope. They can't function at the cognitive level that they were before. They feel like they're a different person. And so basically they have to either resign from their position as a intelligence community a staffer or a diplomat or someone in the armed forces, or they might go part-time where they'll do 2 hours of work per week and that's all they can cope with. So it seems as if someone is trying, or something is trying to incapacitate the government's most, the elite people who are, the high functioning people in the diplomatic staffers and intelligence community, deliberately, so that it's giving the government a warning, saying we will keep targeting these individuals if you continue doing what we don't want you to do.
This policy continues, the harassment will keep up until the beatings will continue until morale improves. Kind of that concept. And, when you start looking at this, especially in the order of, once again, third, fourth order contact of the third and fourth kind. That's something that we speak about regularly on the show, the idea of a watch and a magnet. Once you're around a field like that, I come from the world of broadcast radio and TV. We have very large fences around our antennas for a reason, Doctor. We accidentally discovered microwave popcorn because somebody got a thing of an ear of actual corn from their lunch too close to a radar dish at one point, and it started popping. These are the things that we're using to communicate on a regular basis, whether it's an AM, FM antenna, whatever. These are high-order RF fields. So if you're talking about a technology that can warp space and time, travel interdimensionally, that is a high-order magnetic or RF field. You're talking about major vibration, and that will innately change your body. It will the same way a watch around a magnet, it will always be magnetized. It'll never really tell time right. Your body will be changed when you're around these things.
Exactly. I mean, I listened to a podcast of Kevin Knuth. I can't pronounce his name properly. Is it Knuth or Knuth? The physicist who is interested in UAPs as well. He was at the Seoul conference, but he made a guesstimate of how much energy is actually generated by a UAP, and it's in the it's phenomenal.
It's got to be in the megajoules.
Yeah, megajoules. So if you're going to be around something like that, that's giving off that much radiation, of course you're going to get bio effects on an organism.
I mean, the dentist steps out of the room when he scans your tooth. What do you think that field is doing? So and that's just it. There are effects that begin to happen biologically. There are effects that begin to happen brain-wise. Like you said, a lot of these things that third and fourth kind contact people have when it comes to brain fog, when it comes to inability to function in society, when it comes to the PTSD that they experience, it is very akin to Havana Syndrome and to a lot of the injuries that they are showing.
That's right. Yeah.
So, where do you see this research going from here? Now that you've kind of got a hypothesis for the fact that at least the two symptomologies may be sharing something.
Yep.
And we may be looking at least a similar interaction of biology with technology, whether or not targeted individuals are being visited by aliens or being hit by a brain-shaking laser or what have you. These are high-order technologies. Where do you see this going from here, Doctor?
In terms of research, it's very restricted. I mean, you can't really do much because these patients are like it's hard to get access to the patients, and it's also hard to get access to the information because as a scientist, you've got to have the data, and basically. I've approached the CIA for the data of just the statistics of how many patients throughout the years since 2016 have been affected, in which country, what age they are, what sex they are, etc.
Yeah.
And I've been waiting for close to 8 months now with
FOIA
for my request, the FOIA request. And until I get that statistics, I can't really do much.
Yeah.
And so the IC report that I was talking about when I first started with the UAP Med Coalition is heavily redacted. So basically, as a scientist, it's very difficult to read articles or reports that are, like 53 pages, which are just completely blank.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So I'm not used to that as a scientist. I'm used to reading articles which have all the information there with references.
Yeah.
So it's you're basically kneecapped, and you can't really do much research on that in that field. I suppose I can only keep watching and learning and. If there's any further developments in terms of new developments in terms of what it's what they're coming up with in terms of what is the weapon, what is the EMF that they're using, etc. I can't.
Yeah, the frequency range, things like that.
Do much.
Sorry,
I have looked at this other case where, if you were at the talk, you would have seen this. But basically, there was an incident in Long Island where two researchers from the Galileo project had spotted a UAP over the Atlantic Ocean, near Long Island in August 2022, and they actually taunted this UAP with an infrared beam. And it responded, sending an infrared beam back and paralyzing the two researchers waist down for 1 minute.
Wow.
So this is possibly an indication that if you taunt a UAP, it might react in an adverse way. It won't, kill you, but it will actually do something that will shock you by paralyzing you or something like that. So this is like a bit aside from Havana Syndrome, but in terms of what the mechanism could be, but it indicates that if you do something to a UAP, it could retaliate in the sense that like if the government is doing something which non-human intelligence doesn't want them to do, they could retaliate in a way that could target individuals. So it's just it's sort of like an analogy of what could happen. So you could do research in that regard, but I'm sort of like kneecapped when it comes to doing research on
and I was going to ask, because you were saying like you put in a FOIA request with the CIA about it. I was going to ask, so how's that going? Because I know Dr. Hall has to literally submit his new chapters to the DIA and things like that. They're like, hey, here's what I'm writing. Like. Don't come take my medical license, things like that. And like even quite literally, even writing about it, his lawyer was like, you may want to reconsider this book because they may come take your medical license, and even the idea that a doctor doing research into something that is affecting patients and people could have their medical license stripped from them for simply doing some research into something, whether you approve it, that's horrifyingly authoritarian.
I don't know what the legal aspects of that are, but I'm sure there's some recourse.
It was just it was interesting to even hear the idea that like no they could just they could take your medical license away if you're saying that like this technology is out there and doing that. It's like wow, what a horrifying threat to hold over a doctor's head. How are you supposed to help the symptomology of a patient?
Exactly.
You know, how are you supposed to research the symptomology of a patient if even going down that rabbit hole puts your career in jeopardy? And that's something that is a repetitive course of conversation at this show every year is the idea. I mean, from UAP PD to scientists to, it doesn't matter, like your actual career is threatened by researching this. I mean, and that's one reason why I'm a big fan. And I know a lot of people in communities aren't a fan of the change of UFO to UAP. I'm a big fan of it because it allows people to research it without losing their funding. It allows people to research it without a university saying we're going to take your tenure from you. You know, because you're looking into this fringe. Once you label it a phenomenon, it is in the backyard of science. It's now science's job. Because you got to eliminate the phenomenon from the data set. You know, that's part of it.
Exactly,
and working on that data set, especially like you said, trying to come up with, you can't start a data set, you can't start a study without knowing what percentage you need to, what percentage control do we need against how many people are affected, things like that. How do you look at moving this research forward? How do you look at possibly doing studies in other sides of this right now?
Well, as I said before, basically, like without the statistics, you can't really do much, and I can't really progress until I get this answer from the CIA. If it's classified, well, I've got to wait for it to be declassified, and push for that. And until I get that, when I get that, it'll be clear. I think that what's happening is that the intelligence community doesn't want to, and this is the thing. It's never been questioned by the media as to why these statistics have never been published, and I'd never seen any publication where they were saying, "Oh no, we don't." Why haven't we got the statistics for Havana Syndrome? We want to know. We want to know how many people have been affected in which country, and
our actual employees are being infected. They're like, these people are our employees. I'd like to know what's happening to them for their own safety.
How do you manage this without any, demographics and we want the data behind the incidents and the reason, for the cause of it. If there's an actor behind it, how do they deploy this? Technology. We want to know how it's affecting the brain. They did experiments on monkeys at one stage by microwaving their brains and observing how they would react, and this was in response to, I think, the Moscow signal in the 50s and up to the 70s. The U.S. Embassy was irradiated with microwave radiation by the Russians, and although the occupants of the building probably weren't affected to any great degree because the dosage was quite low. The Biden government actually recently declassified Project Bazaar and Project, I forgot the other project name, but it was related to that sort of like incident where microwaves were irradiating the U.S. Embassy, just to see whether it is microwave radiation that's happening now. And they're saying that it could be pulsed microwave radiation. But if you don't know what the radiation is, how are you going to know the interaction with the brain, etc.? You have to know what's going on. Is it an ionizing type of radiation? Is it a microwave radiation?
Is it a directed? I mean, I work in the world of audio video, RF, things like that. Is it a directed RF signal in the multiple high gigahertz or terahertz range?
Because you're not going to be able to do much not experimental work, but you're not going to be able to put the pathological changes correlate them with the type of radiation that you're expecting it to
no,
be
you're just
deployed.
stabbing
So
in the dark.
You're
Like
stabbing in the
you're going to
dark.
go from
Absolutely.
like 1 hertz all the way up to terahertz
Yep.
and see what happens. And
Yep.
good Lord knows how long that will take.
Correct.
If you know a general range of frequencies, and we know, like, 2011, China came out with a brain-shaking laser to put out in the battlefield to give soldiers brain fog and vibrate their brain inside of their head, things like that. There's all. We even the United States had a program funded to have lasers that put voices into people's heads. So
Yes.
all kinds of technology out there that's using pretty commonplace things, and literally the resonant chamber that is our skull and the transducer that is our brain. The idea that our brain itself is a radio transducer receiving and sending signals all the time is pretty remarkable. And the fact that that can be hijacked, the fact that that can be affected by a distance, even the wild concept that they just did with the folks, and I want to say that they had implants that helped them control seizures.
Right.
And this was done at MIT, where they actively put them into the MRI, had them listen to Pink Floyd, recorded their brain waves, then had them come back like 2-3 weeks later and were like, think about that song we played for you. And they reassembled the Pink Floyd song from people's memories.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like, these are the things we can do with the brain now.
Yes.
So there's like, they're talking about possibly inserting ads into your dreams.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild, the stuff that is out there.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at, once again, where do you start? Because without a frequency range to look into, without knowing how many people are actually affected, you don't know where to start the study.
No,
you know?
I think the intelligence community is deliberately trying to obfuscate and also keep that data away from scientists. And why is that the case? Like, what is so sensitive that we can't have access to that data so we can progress with research into Havana Syndrome?
I think, sadly, some of it, Doctor, might just be the simple fact that we've said for years, microwave weaponry doesn't exist. Microwave weaponry doesn't exist. I'm pretty sure it does. At least by some of these things that are coming out. No, pretty sure it's out there, So it's like, this is basically an Area 51 situation where it's until somebody sues the government because they got poisoned from off-gassing of burning toxic chemicals at Area 51, they will never admit Area 51 exists. Until the government got sued by people that got hurt by Area 51, they had full plausible deniability. So we're right up against that Area 51 moment right now with microwave technologies and things like that, and they are fighting tooth and nail to keep it out of the public spotlight because they've been saying for decades it doesn't exist, and it's out there. So the fact that this symptomology is shared with people of UFO, UAP experience, it cements into my mind that those experiences are something that biologically change you. They are something that mentally and spiritually change you. It changes the way your molecules in your body vibrates. So thank you so much for taking the time, Doctor. I greatly appreciate it.
Chris.
It's been a great symposium. Let everybody know where they can go to follow your work, where they can go to follow your website.
I've got my Twitter account, which they can follow me on. I'm only basically active on Twitter these days. That's just under my name. So.
All right.
So, thank you very much, Chris.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. While you were online checking out all of the amazing work of Dr. Roger Stankovic, everybody, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find all the episodes. That's where you can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. That's where you can get your copy of the Curious Research Observation and Encounter Log. That's also where you can find binaural beat music, as well as great interviews from shows like the International MUFON Symposium. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of the symposium right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.